Xplora X6 Play kids watch. Apparently the best thing you can get for your child to keep track of them. Is it really? We'll soon find out. We had this for a number of months now, and I will give you an honest opinion whether it's worth the money. There's some really good things about this, and some not so good. The reason we didn't give our youngest, who's 9 now, a mobile phone just yet is because she doesn't really need one. We also want to keep our kids off social media for as long as we can. When we were getting this watch, I looked at a number of reviews, typically very fresh ones, so there was not much experience with it apart from unboxing and maybe a couple of days in the field. We've spent months using this, and there are some things that I really don't like. First thing that comes to mind, it is pretty chunky for a small kid's hand. Here's a comparison to my Fenix 6X Pro. But then again, most of kids' smartwatches are pretty chunky unless you'll invest into an Apple Watch, which obviously comes at a greater cost, whereas this one is about £150 in the UK and I believe $160 in the US, which isn't bad for what you're getting. In terms of software, it is pretty fast and responsive. We didn't really have any issues there. It's probably not the most advanced thing you can get, but for basic functions, it's just good enough. The setup was a little bit of a pain. It took way longer than it should for something that simple. The QR code didn't want to register, and then there were other hurdles with registering the SIM card. But you get through that, and once you're past that, it actually functions quite okay. The really cool thing on the Xplora is that there is a tiny little camera just about here. So a small sensor on a small camera, so don't expect high quality photos. But it does the job, and it records movies too. Now, a lot of people ask if you can make video calls with this. Absolutely no chance. It's just there to take tiny little photos. But what your kids can do is they can send them to you in an Xplora app. One of the big drawbacks on this is that there is no keyboard. So the only messages your kids can send to you are predetermined, which is a pretty weird move for a communications device. The good thing is that they can send voice messages, which is pretty handy if your kid talks clearly, which ours doesn't, so we have to go back and forth to understand what she's trying to communicate to us. Sound quality is pretty surprisingly good. You can clearly hear what they're saying, even if there's a background noise. Obviously, if there's a car driving by, same story as with mobile phone, you gotta get a lot of static. And because it's on a loudspeaker, you can hear yourself talking to them as well. But for basic communication requirements, this was surprisingly better than we expected. When you get a message from your kid, there's a notification from the Xplora app, but it doesn't give you a preview of the text message they've sent. And sometimes those notifications are either delayed or they just don't pop up. It doesn't happen very often, but I did miss a couple of calls and a couple of messages throughout the 4 months we've owned the watch. So that's the other thing. There's no way to send text to the watch unless you've got an Xplora app and you're on the approved contacts list, which is great from parental point of view. We decide who our kids can talk to. However, if they've got friends with non-Xplora watches, they can't text each other. But the good thing is that if you add them to the approved contact list, they can call each other. But that's up for you to decide who they stay in touch with. The main function of this thing is really to be a tracker. Now, we'll talk about the GPS function in a second, but the one thing you need to remember is that you need a data plan with this watch. So in the UK, we're lucky enough to have these with different operators. We do have this one on EE, and it works just fine. We didn't really had any issues with the signal unless she's in a building somewhere, but obviously that works the same with any kind of mobile phone. That obviously comes at a cost, and the watch itself is not going to send you any GPS coordinates unless there's a SIM card inside. And it is a physical SIM card. You can't just upload an eSIM to this. Battery life is pretty good. It lasts way over a day, so your kids are nice and safe throughout the day, but you do need to charge it almost daily. It has this really annoying, super loud sound when it runs out of battery. Well, it's actually really loud for most part, but that's good because your kids normally can't hear anything, especially when you're trying to reach them. Which brings me to another point. It's loud, but it's also very chunky. And being chunky, it's not very comfortable to wear all the time on a small wrist, so our daughter keeps leaving this thing in the hallway of her friends, and she can never hear where we're calling her. It's something that you need to keep in mind. The GPS on this watch isn't bad at all. We've used it for 4 months so far, and the location data was pretty accurate. I mean, it's not as good as Apple's or probably Samsung's. Sorry, never owned a Samsung in my life, but it's good enough. It's not your car keys. You can clearly see your child if it's 2 meters off to where she or he should be. It's not waterproof. It says it's kind of splash proof, but just in case, we never really tested that. I really don't want to fry this thing. If you look closely, it doesn't look like it's very well sealed, so I'd probably be okay with some rain. And obviously our daughter rides to school on her bike or on her scooter through the rain because we're in Scotland and it's raining here all the time. Never had an issue, but I probably wouldn't use that in a swimming pool. We did run into some problems with the app itself. It kept logging us out, and it was a massive pain to reset everything because their email database just doesn't work, so you have to reset it through the mobile phone number, and even that sometimes takes a couple of hours for the reset link to come through. I know that some folk mentioned putting an Apple tag on their kids or in their backpacks. From personal experience, that doesn't really work. I've got Apple tags on everything when I travel, and I had multiple instances where my bag was, as a matter of fact, with me on the plane, but it was still showing that I was somewhere in Barcelona or Cape Town. And I was basically getting a heart attack at the transfer airport because typically that was the bag that I had all my important gear in. So they don't work unless there's an iPhone nearby, and it's sometimes potluck that the signal actually bounces off that iPhone and sends you the location. So that's not a good option. So the question is whether I would buy it again. And I'm not 100% sure, because on the one hand, it is doing what it's supposed to do. It tracks the kid, you can communicate with your child, but I really miss the fact that my daughter can't type the messages to us and she has to send voice messages. And the fact that there is some glitches with the app, that was pretty annoying because it happened a few times. Overall, it is a good product, but I would probably start looking at cheap Apple Watch that you can pick up for a couple of £100 off eBay or Facebook Marketplace, purely because it's smaller and it gives you more options, and you can also buy a data plan that allows it to be used without a phone. I hope this helped, and if it did, if you don't mind leaving thumbs up, that'll be awesome, helps to grow the channel. And if you have any questions about the watch, drop them below and I'll get back to you.